right, good evening and welcome to Conservatism on Tap. I'm your host, Wes, and I am thrilled as always to be joined by my brother, John. So good to see you, John. How you doing, buddy?
Doing pretty well. One more weekend, we will be in the new house with the new gig.
Yeah,
So we'll be in the garage. It's going to be awesome.
good deal. I'm going to add your name here to our little thing. Because I was doing this the other weekend, and I know you were out for Father's Day. How was Father's Day, man? Did you have a good one?
Father's Day was amazing.
Yeah.
I've gotten plenty of new clothes, which is great. Had a little day off from the kids, which was also good. Got to sleep in. Let's see, pancakes. What else? Fireworks.
Yep.
Lots and lots of
Uh,
fireworks for July 4th.
but did you get any liquor? That's my question.
I feel like we should probably rename this conservatism at the bar because I'm trying to remember any time that I've actually drank beer while I've been on the show. I think it might have been one time. So I'm back with Bushmills. I guess
Yeah.
I will have beer eventually. I promise.
Well, see, at the bar. I mean, I live in Florida, right? So they just shut down the bars. Now you can go and get beer and you can get liquor from them and you take it
Yep.
home, but they won't let you drink there. So I guess they're getting more targeted in terms of tracing COVID back to like those situations and shutting them down. But that's just a major buzzkill, man. Like, so now we can't get together and drink and talk about all the social distancing that we've had to do all day long. Ah,
Right, I know, man. Tell you what though, ABC store offers curbside pickup. That's been a lifesaver.
yeah.
That has been good. Maybe it's just been easy.
Yeah.
It's just been easy to pick up.
So, the first thing I want to talk about tonight is we have a special guest that's going to be coming on here in about a week and a half. We are going to get the chance to interview Dr. Yuval Levin. And I could not be more excited about this man because he is one of my favorite authors. And I've got the picture of his book here, The Great Debate. I mean, he's written several books, but this is by far my favorite that he's written. So he's an author and a scholar. The title of the work is The Great Debate, Edmund Burke, Thomas Paine, and the Birth of Right and Left. And I think better than almost anyone else I know or have interviewed or read, Dr. Levin captures who Edmund Burke was, but he also captures who Thomas Paine was from the American Revolution, and then he sort of shows the differences in their beliefs. And he's just a really gifted writer and great communicator of the different philosophies that have helped make America what it is. And then I put some of the things that he has done. So he's an editor of several publications. He's a director of cultural and constitutional studies at the American Enterprise Institute, which is a very famous conservative think tank. He worked in the White House under George Bush from 2004 to 2007. And then he's been featured on a slew of national level shows, and his articles have been published in all sorts of places. And I love the fact that we're going to get a chance to talk to him. And so, if folks have questions that they want me to ask him, if you've got some things you want him to explore, I'll be happy to do that. I've already sent him a list of questions. So we're going to have him on the show here in about a week and a half. And Dr. Levin is going to talk to us about Edmund Burke. He's going to talk about, all the things that we've discussed on this show in terms of how do you relate Burke's philosophy to, modern politics and what's going on, and then really that difference between right and left and how we can trace it back. So I can't wait to interview him. I think, by far in terms of the people we've had a chance to interview, this is going to be a new high for us. So any thoughts on that, John? You looking forward to it as well?
I'm telling you, you should be a little bit more skeptical. You should just say, I guess we'll let him on the show. I suppose with that kind of record, we'll let him on, but not conservatism on tap. Okay, that's my space. He can't have that.
you know,
I'm just joking. No, we're super excited about that. He has a lot of things to say about the current issues with, especially COVID-19 and how the federal government could support the states and that sort of thing. So would be happy to hear his take.
Yeah, I mean, you only worked in the White House for 3 years. We'll see. I mean, right? The Wall Street Journal, that's fine, but the New York Times, like, no, it's gonna be amazing. And I've had a chance to talk to his staff and stuff, and I've actually had some experience going up to the American Enterprise Institute where he works and listening to like their lectures on conservatism and theory and policy and all this stuff, and it's just fantastic, and it's exactly what we want to foster here. So yeah, so that's our big announcement in terms of our guests. If there are other people that people want me to reach out to try to interview, I'll be happy to do that. Looking forward to that though. Okay, so
Yep.
now I want to get into the different posts that we had this week because I managed to anger both people from the right and people from the left. So, like that's
What? You never do that.
for
Come on.
whenever I did that. And there's something to be said about that in terms of Burke because he managed to attack the other party, and then he also got people angry in his own party. But not just for fun, but honestly trying to get to the truth of some things. And so let's walk through that because I really kind of want to explain where I was coming from and then get feedback from folks about that. So the first thing, let's talk about cancel culture because that was really where I was critiquing the left. Is I put
Hmm.
out a post earlier this week talking about Yale University, um, and
Okay.
really what I want to do, John, is pick up from when we were talking about Confederate statues. Right, that was really something we talked about
Yeah.
for 2 weeks. Is you get to a point where okay, the left is saying we need to take down Confederate memorabilia. They want to take down any statues to Confederates, and you see some on the right who agree with them. First thing that comes to my mind is Nikki Haley, who's taking down Confederate flags in South Carolina, and then you look at
Hmm.
Mississippi, just voted to change their flag, and so there is an effort to take away the stars and bars and Confederate statues away from our culture, which you and I discussed at length last time. But then that's not where it stops, unfortunately, is you get
Nope.
to a point where the cancel culture comes into place, and now we're taking images off of syrup. We are looking for bases that were named after Confederate generals. Now we're going to change the names of them. And then we go further than that to really canceling almost anything that has any relationship at all to do with the past, especially any type of segregation or slavery or racism of any kind. And that begs the question, does that apply to institutions of the left as well as those in the right and across the country? And that brings up Ann Coulter, who's a conservative commentator, who was like, well, what about Yale University? Because it was named after Elihu Yale, who was a slave trader. And it was absolutely fascinating to me to read through some articles about Yale University and how they respond
Hmm.
to this. So I want to
Yeah. Show me.
yeah, let me walk you through the article that I posted. So it brings up the issue of should we cancel Yale? Should we change the name of Yale? And there's a student here who said, if we believe in renaming military bases that were named in honor of Confederate generals, what principled argument is there for not renaming Yale University? What principles do we use to evaluate what should and shouldn't be renamed? Is renaming a university so costly as to be unthinkable? So that's one of the students at Yale. So, what are your thoughts on him and his question there? Do you agree with that first, and then we'll go.
Well, I think what you're seeing is that there is a lot of momentum from just the death of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and a lot of that can be pretty justified, especially when you're talking about Confederate monuments, like we said last in the past 2 weeks. Put them in museums and find a way to better learn about these historic figures. I know in Richmond they just brought down like a statue of Jefferson Davis forcefully, right? It wasn't necessarily planned, and for certain people, you want to debate that. Like if it was, say, Washington and Lee University are also considering their name change for the second time in like 3 years
Yeah,
due to what's going on, and how conflicted, is the institution? How much is it affecting, their funds, their enrollment, and logistics like that? In what way can they convincingly be able to employ more faculty of color, more can they admit more students of color, because that's going to play in. If we can do that, maybe you don't have to change the name. So there's some logistics that are also involved along with the history of the figure that was involved in the institution. But I think that when you have when it's easier to distinguish what good have they done versus what evil have they committed, it's easier to have that kind of conversation. I think, like say with Robert E. Lee, you've got a general who actively tried to keep that culture alive by fighting, by fighting for it. With Yale, is it a little bit more murky, were they just kind of going along with the culture versus, versus not? Were they actually fighting to defend it? Like those are kind of quite. It's this case by case basis. I think that you need to be able to consider with it. But when it comes to this cancel culture, it's only just a logical step of like how far will it go? I mean, like I'm pretty sure the Dixie Chicks are taking Dixie out of their name.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure, it's all a joke, but like my kids love Paw Patrol, but I think Chase is the pup that is the cop and they're
Oh,
wanting to take down Chase. I know that's a joke, but like, Gone with the Wind was like taken down and now they're trying to figure out like do we need to re-air Gone with the Wind with like new content that tells you that we don't approve of this. It's just something that was made in ignorance.
well, see that.
I wonder whether it just it won't end until you start figuring out what is this threshold that we need to start talking about, and it's different for every university. It just is going to be that.
But here's my point: is the student is asking, what principles should we apply in order to evaluate what should and should not be renamed? Do you think that that would be a good discussion to have before you start renaming stuff, before you start tearing things down? I mean, Yale already renamed different colleges within its system. It's already renamed different institutions that it has, including Calhoun College, because it said can't do it because he was involved in slavery. Shouldn't like it's amazing to me that we're already in the process of renaming things, renaming military bases, and canceling other things, and yet the principles at one of the highest academic institutions in the lands have not been established in terms of what the criteria is in order to do that. Did you exist when slavery did? Okay, well, there's a red flag right there.
Yeah, whoa,
No,
whoa.
yeah, like you were born in the wrong time. Did you, did you fight against it? Maybe, but how hard? If we're tearing down the statues of Abraham Lincoln, then apparently not hard enough, and yet he was the one who led the charge to get it abolished. Like, how far do we have to go in order to satisfy the demand? So, the other question of this is, when you get into are we actually supporting racism and the institution by having a name or by having some type of statue to them? And I think that's really the question. But let's look at some of the other feedback. So this was a guest lecturer who said to Yale chagrin, they have a point, and what he's talking about is the conservatives who are asking, is Yale going to rename it, its campus too? To Yale's chagrin, the conservatives have a point. It must be difficult to take a cold, hard look in the mirror when your face is covered in blood. The awful murders of
Mhm.
George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and many others should not have been required to start an honest conversation about race in America. Hello. What will it take to galvanize the process at Yale? And I love this because this is a guest lecturer who's saying maybe before we all demand that, the rest of the country change, maybe we should have looked at ourselves first. And I think that's just speaking truth to power right there. Is
Mhm.
it kind of comes back to what Jesus said in Matthew, which is, oh, why are you looking to take this, something out of another guy's eye when you have a log in yours, right? It's looking at that the standard by which we judge others. When you apply it to yourself, can you meet it? And I think in the case of the left, apparently not. Right? Is you got to
Mhm.
be willing to apply that to others, and they haven't done that, and yet there are there's already this force that's applied to others. So I love that, and then this is really where it gets interesting. Is this is the president's response? The president of Yale, he said that, as I stated in my op-ed in a previous article that he wrote, Yale, both the institution and the person, they have a history of violent racism. The priority at this moment then is to see how the school's resources can be used to help the communities and populations that it has discriminated against throughout the past few centuries. And then he goes on to say, now, as far as the president of Yale understands, he wrote, the actual guy, Elihu Yale, was relatively unexceptional in his own time with respect to the slave trade in the parts of Asia in which he worked. And the name Yale was applied to the current university not to honor Yale's moral mistakes, but rather Yale's initial donation that helped found the institution. So what he's saying there is, yeah, I mean, this guy, like, he was involved in the slave trade, and He really didn't fight against it, and that's kind of a problem. But hey, he gave us a lot of money, and when we think of Elihu Yale, we're not thinking of his, support of the institution of slavery or indifference. We are thinking of the money that he gave us and the fact that he wanted an educational institution, and we just kind of leave that other part out. So it's okay. So we can keep it. And to me, that's
Oh,
absolutely ridiculous. I want to get your reaction,
okay.
and then I'm going to rant for a second. So go ahead.
Well, it's just interesting that all of a sudden that we can start distinguishing between like, oh wait, all of a sudden people were complex when it's affecting our investments.
Exactly.
Now people are complicated. Now people are a mix of good and evil. Now it takes a little bit more contextual influences to kind of figure out what were their motivations here, what were their motivations there. I'm wondering how much that they apply that to themselves. They don't want to apply that to the organizations and the institutions that they don't like. And I think the right has done a lot of that. That's been their defense all along.
Right.
Um, but all of a sudden, when it's affecting the left, it's like people get complicated, and that's where I mean, I'm sorry, but like you want to go on a cancel culture rant on this. I mean, like people are complicated. I mean, I hate to say this, and maybe it's because I'm drinking, but like MLK, he had extramarital affairs. Okay, he's a complicated man. All right, but yet he's a civil rights leader that we all love and respect. But like when it comes to his wrongs, it's just like, but that's just not really the mainstream affecting us right now. But maybe in 100, 200 years, when all of a sudden that's the main thing, like, are we going to take his name off places? Like, I
Exactly.
think there's a lot more of a sense of, okay, if you're going to change the name, then what are you going to change it to? How do you know that's not going to change in the next 100 years? Or do we just accept the fact that like morals change or issues change, and then all of our names are going to change like on institutions and in the next 100 years or so? There needs to be a bigger conversation about this. But yes, okay, now you're thinking things are complicated. Things have always been complicated. People have always been complicated.
Right. Like he's looking at the legacy of this man, and he says, okay, so yes, he wasn't up for racial reconciliation. He didn't do a lot, if anything, to abolish the slave trade. May have perpetuated, but he also did other things like supporting education, and that makes him all right. And it makes me think of, I don't know, Donald Trump and the support that he has amongst conservatives who say, yeah, he's not particularly good at racial reconciliation. He's not particularly sensitive, on that topic, but he does all these other good things like, oh, I don't know, the economy in terms of investing in, like America's economy and bolstering its processes and pulling troops from overseas and investing, into deals with India and the Middle East and others to be able to bolster, America's economic value. And so that's what conservatives are looking at. They're looking at the fact that, yeah, hasn't done, particularly great with X, Y, and Z in terms of race relations, but he's done great over here in terms of, creating more jobs in the country. He's, done work that they appreciate on immigration. He's put justices on the Supreme Court, and that's why they enjoy him. And yet they're going to be lambasted for that on the left, who constantly says racist, 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 racist. And so,
Hmm.
where then is that line between a good person and a bad? Where is the litmus test for saying this person is someone that we can appreciate their good without their bad? And this person, I guess Calhoun, oh, he's more bad than good. And what does that come down to? And that's where I come back to Burke himself, who said that we talk about tyranny, we talk about racism, we talk about evil, and yet it's easy to forget that all of those things exist within us. There is a tyrant within you, there's a savage within you, there's an evil person within you, there's a racist within you, and you have to work every single day to keep that part of yourself subdued and subjected to your virtue. If you just let yourself go, then you're going to engage in evil and all kinds of vice. And it's through our institutions, our society, our friends, our religion, all these other things that we have that we are able to be good. It's through our will and our strength to be able to pursue virtue that we don't end up bad. And the minute that we let go from that, we will. And so Burke has this, more nuanced view that Yale is apparently discovering in terms of evaluating people in the virtue of goodness and badness that allows some forgiveness for, someone like, MLK who did all these good things and yet had some vice within him. Yeah, we all do, right? But
Whoa.
in the midst of cancel culture, it's again this impulsive reaction that just says, no, you're all gone, and there's no principles within it. And so,
I'll tell you this. I mean, if you're going to cancel anything, can we cancel the 2007 Transformers film from Michael Bay? Don't they kill like, you know, the black robot who talks jive and break dances and things like that? I mean,
well,
cancel that. Come on, that we know that needs to go.
where did again?
No,
What are the
but yeah,
questions?
but on a serious level, like totally agree with you. I think this really the question that comes down to is that when I feel empowered, when I see that there needs to be a change in some way, there is obviously a problem that needs to happen. I'll all of a sudden, like again, like I said before, we are politicizing a whole new generation of folks, and it's easy to feel empowered, and it's easy all of a sudden to just draw that line in the sand and say, "Whoa, like." I'm gonna like, totally like this is my life's mission to like take down these names and anyone who defends these names are racists, and it's easy just to call all that out. And when you say that like all of a sudden life is complicated, like all of a sudden you're deflating that sense of empowerment that they have, that power that they have over others, and like they have to pause and they have to reflect on themselves, they have to reflect on what other people are saying, and they have to work out solutions that are not always that easy. And it takes a long time to create sometimes these solutions, and it takes a lot of discussion. And people don't want to hear that, especially in an age of social media. It's easy just to hear what other people say has gone on. I know that we've had people commenting on our channel, and they said like they were pretty much like their posts were being taken down from other people's pages because of misunderstanding, because of their last name. Like, how crazy is that?
Yeah,
It's people don't want to listen, they don't want to hear anything, they just want to see a name and all of a sudden make a huge assumption, even today, even on social media right now, and then just write the person off. Probably a racist.
right,
Probably.
right.
Like it's terrible.
Yeah. So, I mean, we get to that point where it's the movement, it's the empowerment that people feel from judgment of others, and that's driving it more so than a particular standard of trying to institute right and wrong, and that's what I see. But now, so while the left here is dismissing things that they don't want to have to face or they don't want to agree with or that's going to cost them greatly, we have to be careful that we don't do that on the conservative side, and we again stick to that standard. We stick to those facts. And so the other post that I put out this week was talking about Trump and how almost every poll, whether it's being done by Real Clear Politics or whether it's being done by,
Hmm.
it's publicized by Fox News or USA Today or liberal, New York Times, whatever it is, almost every poll is showing support for Trump dropping very quickly. And I'll show you one of the polls that I actually shared, which is this one that shows that Trump's
Okay.
disapproval remains at a high point during the pandemic, and then it actually shows that disapproval going up. You can see that red graph going up to 58 disapproval, and the blue
Hmm.
the support at 41%. But then you break it down amongst actual Trump voters, and it's showing a decrease by a net of 8 points, even amongst his own base, which he, sorely needs in order to win the election. And the immediate reaction to this, John, was people saying, "Well, polls can't be trusted. Polls can't be trusted. This is BS. Like it's just the establishment coming at us." And I mean, look at the polls and what they predicted in terms of Hillary Clinton winning, and what a
Mm.
complete joke, right? And so we shouldn't have to trust what pollsters are putting out. And you could look at the number of people that participated in this poll, and it wasn't a whole lot. It was like just over 1,000. And then you break it down from there, and you realize that what they're doing is they're taking a representative of the America at large, and they're using margin of error and those type of things to statistically project what that approval is likely to be. And in doing so, it's not like they polled, a large number of people or great now. They just got to a point where they projected it out. And so what people are saying is, why should we trust this? It's only a polling gimmick that's designed to
Hmm.
reaction and to get people riled up. So, what are your thoughts on that? Because I can certainly appreciate and understand that critique.
I would say that that's not a new criticism. Don't think that if you hear that being said, all of a sudden, like, wow, that's a brand new argument. All of a sudden, polls can't be trusted. Wow, I mean, they've been polling for like the past 100 years, basically. Um,
Yeah.
and sometimes like the polls don't show a ton of accuracy, but polls account for that sort of thing. I mean, research has developed in such a way, and polling has developed in such a way where they do try to account for errors. And to be honest, the 2016 elections, there was an accounted for error. I mean, even though Hillary had that popularity by a few points, like there is a margin of error no matter how much polling you do, and you account for that and say it might be X number of points of give or take
Yeah.
her popularity, and it was within that range. Okay, it can be in a sense, not as reliable as you think. That doesn't mean that they're rigged. That doesn't mean that they're useless. The most I would ever go toward it is that they're not infallible. Like they're not going to be like the telltale all. The best they can do is give you this kind of spectrum and say people kind of fall within this kind of line. What's fascinating to me, and that I know that we're probably going to touch on, is that like obviously if the polls are in your favor, um, awesome, cool. But then when the polls aren't in your favor, then all of a sudden, like something's going on. They
Yeah.
sampled too many Democrats. They sampled, there was errors here or there. Like, polls do like they're not a perfected art, of research, but they certainly have come a long way. And you can detect the errors if they actually. I mean, they haven't come this far to be erroneous, but they do account for a margin of error.
Well, a
And
couple.
in this case, I'll tell you, 2016, Hillary was extremely unpopular. Like her unfavorable polling was just phenomenal. Biden is not so much. I mean, is he super super favorable? Probably not, but he's far more liked than Hillary ever was. And with Trump, I think that you have a lot more of a political history now than you didn't have before. With Trump, he had he didn't really have a long spreadsheet of political, policies or anything like that. He was just this person that any idealist could really jump onto the train. And now he's had 4 years of successes and failures that are all going to come back to bite him with this. Just like you had, it's almost like the longer the trail, paper trail that you have when it comes to your political career, it's almost like the worse it gets.
Yeah.
And which is kind of ironic, but I mean, it's the same with Trump now that he has a paper trail of his own policies, of his own actions. Like this could really affect the election in a negative way for him. So I think there's some differences there where the polling does need to be trusted, just not assumed as infallible.
Well, so a couple of things here. So first, you talk about the 2016 election, and you remember in that Hillary did win the actual popular vote, but she
Yep.
didn't win in the right places. She lost
Right. The influential votes. Yep.
Wisconsin, right, and other areas where she needed it. So even though she had the majority of support, she didn't have it where she needed it. But more than that, yeah, I think the argument comes back to if you have a poll, what do you do with it, right? And do you think critically about it? And many liberals did not. I mean, there were all of these different liberal outlets and institutions who said the election is over. The election is over, and Hillary's got it. And this was weeks, months out. They said case closed. She's done, and they used the polls to be able to support that. When if you actually look at the polls, you saw Trump actually rising towards the end and entering that margin of error. And so there was this shock among liberals, and there's all these YouTube videos of liberals melting down, the Young Turks or whatever, who were like just
Yeah.
flipping out because they had no idea that this was coming. And they were like, but the polls, the polls, the polls. And then you actually look at them closer and you realize like it was pretty close in Florida and some of these other places for sure.
Hmm.
Just a dismissal of that. And so, it's not so much the polling itself, it's what you do with it. It's do you
Hmm.
say, well, hey, you know what? This poll says, this is the end result. And so there we go. And there were some comments saying, well, are you saying Trump's going to lose? Definitely not. We still have months until the election. This is simply
Right.
looking at where we are today. Can he turn this thing around? Of course he can. Is it fatalistic in the terms of, oh, here's a poll of 1,000 people, and so now we're done? Absolutely not. And that's where, in terms of this page, I'm committed to looking at them critically and examining them as we go along. And let's look at a couple others because I put up a poll back in February that talked about
Okay.
Trump having the highest job approval, his personal best of his presidency. And he was up to 49%, largely on the basis of economic gains. And I shared that with several, on our page. And several people saw that and they loved it, and they're like, yep, here's a heart and here's the thumbs up, like great post. But then I share a post where, he's not doing that. And then people are like, oh, this is BS. So was it BS whenever it was something that we wanted to hear, And then And then all of a sudden it's something that we don't, and now it's also BS. And if that's your view on it, I can understand that because that's a principled argument. You say, look, polls can tell you misleading information. They're based upon processes that aren't foolproof, and therefore it could be wrong. Right? I can
Mm,
find that, but just make sure you're being principled in both cases. Where it gets really interesting, John, is when you look at things that the president himself has said. And I'm going to read you this tweet from
oh, this would be
the
nice.
other day. Is that he says, "Do not believe the fake news media. The Oklahoma speech, and this is when he kicked off his reelection campaign, had the highest Saturday television ratings in Fox News history." And then he talks about his interview with Sean Hannity and how that dominated TV with my interview on Thursday night, more than CNN and MSNBC combined. Those are the real polls, the silent majority, and the fake polls. And so I had people comment on that and say, I don't trust the polls, right? I don't trust what they're doing. I don't trust their processes, but I will trust TV ratings and the president talking about that. And like he's saying here, those are the real polls. And what I would ask people to do is apply the same skepticism and critical thinking that you have about things that you don't want to believe or you don't want to hear, bad news, as you do to the good. And I did a little,
Mhm.
I did a little research in terms of the Nielsen Media Research, which actually is what provides the TV ratings. And if you look at this, it says this is from howitworks.com. It says Nielsen uses a technique called statistical sampling to rate the shows, the same technique that pollsters use to predict the outcomes of elections. They create a sample audience and then count how many in that audience view each program. And then they extrapolate the sample and estimates the number of viewers in the entire population watching the show. And so now we're back to this notion of critical thinking, and do we apply that as a standard, or do we only use it to filter out the stuff that we don't want? And so I see, on the left, there is this desire to cancel culture that they don't like, especially when it comes
Mhm.
to conservatives and the right, non-liberal institutions. But then whenever it is applied to their own institution, he was a complex guy, and the East India Trading Company stuff wasn't that big of a deal. But then on the right, we do
Mhm.
the exact same thing as we say, oh,
Yep.
it's a poll that we like, it's a TV rating that we like, cool, love it. It's one that we don't like, nope, we don't trust it, we don't know the processes. And how do we get to a place where we are actually principled in what we do and we wrestle with the bad news and try to overcome it? And then, of course, we applaud the good news when it comes, and we're still skeptical of it even then. How do we get to
Mm.
a place where we're actually principled in our politics and our philosophy and how we view the world, John? That's my question for you tonight, my last one.
I think that, when you share polling information, I think it just comes with this sense of when you share polls. I know that when you share polls on the channel, immediately the reactions that you might get are, this is complete BS. What poll did you get? Oh yeah, no, they can't be trusted. Like unless it's a poll that they favor in some way. And I think the conversation needs to go farther. Like obviously these are real people who were polled. Obviously these are people that responded. It was a random sample. Like we need to be able to talk about this. Why do people feel this way? I think another reason that poll sampling and the results that you get can be like the conversation can be obstructed is because you know what all it comes down to is like who are you going to vote for, who are you going to vote for? Like you might have been a Trump supporter back in 2016, and now that you are older and wiser, or that you see what kind of president he's been, like you're kind of like I don't really view him opening up the country as being that favorable. Well, like, but yeah, when the chips are down and you're in the line, like, who are you going to vote for? Are you really going to vote for Biden? And like, that's what they care. It always comes down to who are you going to vote for, because otherwise, everything that happens in the middle of this doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And I hate that kind of logic. That's what I see in Christian circles all the time, which is like all it matters is the end result. Nothing that happens here in the middle kind of matters too much. It's just about the destination, and I think that's wrong. I think that you need to be able to have the conversations that are hard, and to be able to say that people actually feel this way. What are their stories? Why are they feeling this? And where is that leading? But otherwise, for so many people, it just boils down to what's the vote. Just tell me the vote, because that's all that matters. Polls don't matter. Your how you feel right now doesn't matter to me. All that I care about is just what you're going to check box, and that's kind of where I want to kick it back over to you, Wes. Is like, I mean, with the statement of the ballot matters more than anything else.
Yeah. Well, so a couple things. The first one is I have a simple solution for Yale. which is just rename it Burke University because this whole East India Trading Company and slavery and stuff. Burke is famous for going after Warren Hastings, prosecuting slavery, and standing up for the rights of Indians and blacks and all other sorts of minorities. He has an outstanding record, of providing mentorship to William Wilberforce, who brought the slave trade down in his lifetime. Right? Like, just name it after Burke. You're good. Not that, not that Burke is perfect, but he's certainly a much better role model. So that one's an easy solve. But
Everything is Burke. Burke University.
just change it. You're
Burke Bar.
like, like, um,
Jonathan Sheldon Burke. I like it. I like it already.
you don't have to worry about it. Burke didn't have any slaves. Like, he wasn't a So, but when you get into the actual the arguments here and the philosophy behind it, it's a little bit more complicated, and especially when you get into polling and all this kind of stuff. And that's when it gets back to Burke's philosophy. And his is one is it's always reflective, right? He was looking at other people in Parliament whenever Great Britain was going to invade the United States, and they were going to try to put down the American Revolution. And he was saying, can we just stop for a minute in all of our anger and all of our judgment against America? Let's just stop for a minute and realize these are good people who just want access to their God-given rights. And why is it so bad if we give that to them and we become partners? Let's just take a minute, step back from the emotion, and have a civil conversation about this. That's what he was calling people to do. And I think that's where you have to get to, John, is you have to get to a point where you look at what's going on. You have this immediate emotional reaction. I don't want to see Trump, going down in terms of his approval rating. And then you think about, well, wait a minute, let's look at the critical thinking here. Let's see if this poll is actually indicating, anything substantive. And you look at the other ones and you say, okay, it really is across the board. Could there be a reason for that? Could there be a reason beyond just what I see in my own life, beyond how I personally feel? Could there be a reason that maybe his, support is dropping to some extent? And could that be related to actions that he may or may not be taking? And is there a chance to grow here? Is there a chance to be better tomorrow? Can you take that criticism and feedback and be better tomorrow? And it's
Yeah.
reflective attitude as opposed to that combative attitude that can actually lead to growth. I mean, I take criticism all the time on our page. I look at every single comment that comes through, and when someone just says BS, they're like, "Oh, I hate this." I'm like, "Okay, well, there's not a lot of value there to make me better." But then when someone lays it out and they're like, "Hey, this is why we don't trust polls." Okay, that's a really good argument. Let me look into why you're saying that. Or we look at Yale University. This is why it shouldn't be changed. Let's look at the actual substance of that. Or someone tells me, you put out a stupid post and here's why. And they take the time to explain more beyond just a
Right.
emotional reaction. We actually have the chance to grow and learn. And I think that's what has to happen. That's the goal of this channel, is as we operate on YouTube and Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and all these other things, as we put out these videos, that we have these discussions like you and I are having, is our goal is always to say, what is the value of what we can learn in life from our day-to-day experience as well as history in the past? And if that's the attitude that you have, then you're going to soak up everything that you can get in terms of information and input every day, filter it through, and then come away with more than just an emotional reaction of, hey, I don't like this. So that's where
Yeah.
I'm at with
I think
Mr. Burke's philosophy. We're running low on time, so I'm going to give you the last word, and then we're going to head out. But that's where I come to, whether it's
yeah.
right, left, Republican, Democrat. I come back to that attitude with everyone and everything. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think what you're hitting on here is a paradigm shift. People think that in order to get serious about politics, you have to see where all the dividing lines are, pick your side, and think like, I got to fight for that. As soon as you say like a view or two, then all of a sudden you are this. I have to categorize you as this, and these are all of my arguments against you for that. And when it comes to like a Burger King conservative, we advocate a paradigm shift here. Is that if that's the kind of place that you are coming from, drawing the line and saying, I'm this, you're that, and you must believe this, so get out of here. It's like we want to say, well, okay, here's my card, and let me know when you want to take this a little bit more seriously, right? It's a sense of like when you want to be serious about politics, when you want to be serious about making a difference, you've got to assume that you're coming to this channel to grow yourself.
That's right.
You have room to grow. You have room to get out of this box. You have to admit you come in with a box. You have to break this box, and this channel will help you do it. Doesn't mean that you have to believe what we believe. It just means that you need to see these posts that we make as being like an opportunity. In what way is my box limited here? I got to push, And why does this offend me? I need to push, and then break through and see something a little bit more enlightening for yourself. If you like what you're hearing, if you're uncomfortable with what you're hearing and you don't know why, we encourage you to subscribe. It doesn't mean that you have to agree with all of our views, but it does mean that you are admitting, hey, I want to know more. I want to be able to grow, and this is a channel that's it's pushing my buttons, but I want to know why that is. I want to be able to converse why that is. We welcome that kind of conversation.
Yeah, someone was asking me, they were like, why would you post that when it's not helpful to the president? I'm like, I'm going to post it because it's being reported all over the place. It's based upon, a narrative that we need to deal with and that we need to discuss. And, it's substantive in terms of the things that I've posted with in the past. And we're going to have to wrestle through this, in terms of what it means. And so, is it something that may offend people? Is it something that may get them talking? Is it something that may go against what they want to hear? Of course it is. I mean, if I looked at myself a year ago or 2 years ago or 10 years ago, I believe
Oh man.
different things. Things that I posted are gonna offend me, and I'm gonna look at myself probably a year or two from now. I'm like, yeah, I could have done a better job with that. That's how we grow. And so it's
Hmm.
not this effort to trigger people or to get people angry. It's more this effort of let's look at what's going on in the world and let's flesh through it and let's have a discussion about it. So we're committed to
Yep.
that. Burke is
Yep.
committed to that, and that's what the channel's about. So yeah. So and I can't wait to interview Yuval Levin on that because I think he really shares that commitment to introspection and to looking deeply within these belief systems in Burke as well as Thomas Paine. So we're going to have that on the channel here in a couple weeks. Not going to see you before the 4th of July, John. So hope you have a great holiday. We're going to have Kyle and Chris on for that show. So it's going to be awesome
Oh, awesome.
with you in a couple weeks here. So thanks again for your time, all your insights, and we'll see you again soon.
Thank you. I'll have beer next time.
Sounds good. Mine's already finished. So have a good one.